all they followers gonna see it.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. This is Tyra Watson coming to you all from Southwest Funeral and Cremation. This is the first time affair. So what we're doing is I'm going to do this segment live for today. If it seems I should continue on a live platform, I will. It's going to be a area time here. Turn your volume down. I need to turn your volume down. Thank you. So, basically, what we want to do, whether it be a recording or whether it be a live segment like this, so that you guys can be interactive as well. Let me get myself together. I'm sorry. Or whether it be a live segment like this, the goal here is going to be to give you guys a frame of reference. It's going to give you all a place to go for a grief, to start grief work. It is my pleasure to be able to serve you guys in this way. It is my pleasure to be able to start this platform with you all. I will come to you all every Friday. When I come in on Fridays, it's basically going to be my goal to either piggyback on things that we have talked about in our grief support group, and or to touch on some concept of grief work, some concept of things that one should be looking to attain as they start to process life without. So you can look up and get in contact with us through our Facebook page here. It is Southwest Memorial Chapel and Life Plan Solution. And we are located at 7901 South Kaminsky. That is 1 block west of Pulaski, across from Bogan High School. We have a very interactive website. Please feel free to visit our website. That is www.southwestfunerallandcremation.com. Again, that is southwestfunerallandcremation.com. So last night we did do our first grief support group by way of social distancing. We did do this platform to extend a hand to those who may be suffering right now, who are bereaved, who are grieving, who are experiencing loss during this time. Whereas normally a grief support group, we know, would be in person. Unfortunately, while we cannot yet convene, and I'm sure most people do know that funeral service has changed in the fact that we are limited to 10 people within our building. We are still serving the community. We are still having funeral services. We are still doing visitations. We are still honoring the lives of the loved ones of the families that we served, based off of what the family would like, while still complying with CDC guidelines. However, when it comes to helping our community with grief support, 10 is not enough. So we did decide to open up a platform and do a Zoom. And that allowed us to be able to meet, to start to render some support to people who are bereaved. What was birthed out of that, which is a new thing, is now the Southwest Grief Corner. The Southwest Grief Corner, welcome. This will now be a platform that will go on Fridays. I will come to you all on Fridays to offer, again, some form of counseling, help, resource for those of you who are bereaved at this time, for those of you who are grieving at this time. We suffer loss in many ways, and many times we don't have an outlet, nor do we have a place to channel the energies that we feel as a result of the losses that we suffer. So Southwest is here to help with you, to help the community, to help the families that we serve, and even to help the families that we did not serve. But because we're here to help the community, then it just is our pleasure to extend now grief support formally in many different shapes and forms to you all. So I wanted to, for those that were not able to join us last night, just give you guys a brief piggyback. Basically, we want to, as a starting place for those who are new, we wanted to help you to identify where you may be in your grief process. Readily identifiable is that there are multiple things that do cause grief. It might be a loss of a job. It might be the loss of a home. It could be the loss of a relationship. And I'm not talking just through death. I'm talking the terminal end of a friendship, the terminal end of a marriage, the terminal end of relationships. And during this COVID season, even more difficult is to deal with the terminal end of a relationship or the end of a thing and not have a place to really be able to vent or be able to deal with your feelings and or emotions. So as we identify that there are many different angles and many different things which may cause us loss, we want to try and help identify the things that we're going to experience as a result of the loss, so that in trying to help you all, we identify and attack everything that may be surfacing in a healthy way. So when we talk about grief does have 5 stages. It definitely would be our position to help people to identify where they may be in their grief area currently. So if at this time you're grieving loss, and I do want you to understand that it doesn't have to be a loss from 2 weeks ago or last month. Matter of fact, for those who are suffering a loss of a loved one from a week or 2 weeks ago, even a month ago, right now could still be too soon. And I understand that too. It could be too soon to understand or concept that you even know where you may be in your grief work, let alone even understanding maybe that coming to terms or coming to grips with the death itself. So as we are considering that some people may be in their grief work and it's maybe a month or two that the loss has occurred, or maybe it could be that some people are doing their grief work and the loss was 2 years ago or 3 years ago. I think that it's very important that people understand, and that you all understand more so, that there is no set time for your grief work. However long that takes you, so long as you are going through the process and you're not causing any harm to yourself, so long as you are going through the process and you're not doing anything that is unhealthy, then what you're doing 9 times out of 10 is exactly what you should be doing. No one can tell you how to grieve. No one can tell you how you should feel in your bereavement, because that part is the work that you have to do for yourself. There are 5 stages of grief, and that's where we want everyone to that is dealing with some form of grief or loss, that has come to terms with the fact that they know that they're having maybe emotional symptoms, and or you may be having physical symptoms. Emotional symptoms may include anything from sleep deprivation to change of appetite to fatigue to just loss of interest generally. Physically, so, maybe overeating or not eating at all. Maybe not sleeping. It can cause additional stresses. Residually, so maybe effects in blood sugar, or for those that are diabetics and even that are not. Stress can cause a variety of things to a person, and definitely to one who's already sick, it can just exacerbate or make that worse. And to one who is well, stress can onset sickness in the body. So we want to help you to identify where you are in your grief process and understand that whether you're experiencing physical or emotional stress, or symptoms, that then you start to try and work through these things. So one of the stages of grief that I want to start with for this week is going to be denial. There are 5 stages of grief. They are denial, anger, bargaining, acceptance, as well as depression. There is no set order to go through these particular stages of grief. And there's nothing saying that just because you go through a particular stage of grief that you won't regress back to another stage. And there's nothing also stating that you will go through each stage of grief. You may spend a undetermined amount of time in one stage and then jump to a latter stage, or you may have progressed to acceptance and then find that at a later point that you're back at anger. Know that these things also are normal. So what I would like to do, our next grief support group will be June 11th. The grief support groups, we do want to do those once a month. And whether we are still under social distancing confines or whether we are not, we will still maintain the Zoom or live platform in order to do the grief support under these new guidelines. But also in between time, once a week on Fridays, I will be here to touch on different topics in order to be able to help you guys, as I stated. And so between now and June 11th, we will touch on all 5 areas of the stages of grief. And hopefully you will find where you are at, and I will be able to give something to help you in order to facilitate your work through that stage and or just be more welcoming of that stage. So the first stage, as I mentioned, is denial. Denial is a stage of grief that is set as the first one because it identifies and syncs with shock. If a person is sick, or if a person was not sick and not expecting to die, didn't have any terminal issues or behaviors or things like that going on with them, then when you find out about the death, or you find out that there will be a death, there's always shock. And the shock being associated then with this denial frame has everything to do with it's a self-defense mechanism. And when we're dealing with grief and we deal with loss and the notification of loss, one of the major things that loss brings is intensity of emotion. And so when we're dealing with intensity of emotion, in order to not overload ourselves, which is what happens with shock, in order to not overload ourselves, hi Risha, in order to not overload ourselves when our body becomes overwhelmed in an instance of loss, as a defense mechanism, then denial besets us in order to be able to start to process what actually is unfathomable, to start to process what has just happened to us that is unimaginable, to start to process that there is going to be a shift and there's probably nothing that we can do about it, and we have to learn then how we can accept that. But then if we are talking about the loss of attachment, the deeper the attachment, the closer the relationship, the more intense the response is going to be. So for people who have suffered loss from deep relationships, deep attachments, the grief work is going to possibly take longer. And again, as we said, there is no set order that a person will experience these stages of grief. when we talk about the shock that will beset a person when I was not expecting them to die, when they came with COVID and they said, go to the store, we're going to lock down to April 7th. I know here in Chicago, we're going to lock down to April 7th. Go to the store, be safe, wash your hands. You know, they cleaned out everything. That's what everybody did, with the hope that on April 7th we would be okay. But ultimately, what wind up happening is this disease, this virus got worse. And as people had already started dying at that time, now we're under a lockdown that then inhibited and prevented people from seeing their loved ones. And as people started to then continue to take on this virus, as people continue to get sick with this virus, as they continue to put additional mandates on and restrictions on how to move, then you had someone that you love to go to the hospital because they weren't feeling well. And the next news that they got, as the family spoke to them from the phone, was that their loved one had not made it. So how do you tell me then that my mother, my father, my sister, my brother, a 23-year-old just died here in Chicago from COVID? And at the time that he passed away, he had been to the emergency room. They sent him back home. And then he went back to the emergency room. He did test positive for COVID. He did have asthma. He was diabetic. But this young man lost his life. He leaves behind a 4-year-old daughter. And of course, this family is in shock, as many families who've suffered loss right now are in shock. So denial is definitely a stage that a lot of people may be in right now, because to be able to even accept the reality of a loss under these circumstances, it's just not, it's unthought of, you know. And then you cannot bring the community, which is the purpose of funerals and memorial services, to bring the community of the loved one, to bring your community around you, so that they can embrace you with the love that's needed at the time of loss, to embrace you with the support that you need at the time of loss. We can't do that. So that just compounds the grief for so many, and that so many are feeling. We have hundreds of thousands of people losing jobs right now, and you have hundreds of thousands of people who are still uncertain about the fate of their employment as the coming months. We're looking at Boeing. We know is a national company. They've been around very long time. And even for a company like Boeing, they're expecting to lay off by the end of July 13% of their employee population, which equates to something like 30,000 people. But grave loss, people are suffering. And so how do you tell me a job that I've worked at for so long, now is gone, and I can't support my family? You know, if I've, even with unemployment and welfare, it's still meant to help you to get along, but it doesn't help you to fare well. And so as we are trying, hey, Brandon, as we are trying to make adjustments and deal with these things, people are grieving. And people that are in this denial stage, that are still dealing with the shock and the fact that they cannot come to grips with the loss, we understand. How long are you going to be in this denial stage? There's no set time. There's no set time to be in any particular stage. So we want to encourage you to know that in this denial stage, your in-game goal work is going to be to accept the loss. Whether it's going to be to accept the loss with the job, whether it's going to be to accept the loss of the loved one, whether it's going to be to accept the loss of the home or the relationship, you have to accept the loss. Once you can come to grips with accepting the loss, then you can move on into the other areas of your grief work. Again, everyone doesn't necessarily go through every stage of the grief work. Of the stages of grief work. And there's no set time, again, for the area or time frame that you'll spend. So I just want to encourage today those that are in the denial phase of their grief work that you are going to be okay. As we are working you through your denial period, your only job is to start to come to grips with the loss. That's it. Now, how you do that is up to you. It's suggested that there are grief groups like ours that you can do. We meet once a month. And you can also do additional private counseling. We have that available to you. You can talk with myself. I can get you in the hands of additional persons who do specialize daily in helping people through the things that they may be feeling. I want you all to know that wherever you may be, as it regards the loss or the multiple losses of those that you have loved, that life still has to go on for you too. At some point, as you are continuing to try to move forward and deal with whatever your loss in whatever area, in order to deal with whatever the new circumstances is going to be, do understand that you do have to keep moving forward. Every day, be encouraged when you wake up and the sun hits your face. Be encouraged to know that that's a day that is an indicator that there is still life meant for you to live. Life is for the living. And so continue to live it, no matter the circumstances. Continue to live it. So as you work through your denial period, do understand that we are here for you. If you need to call us, our phone number is 773-424-3151. Again, the phone number here is 773-424-3151. Denial is, again, the first stage of grief. Over the next few Fridays, we will explore all of the stages so that we can first help you identify what stage of grief you possibly are in. Okay, so today we covered denial. Next week, we are going to cover anger. So anger is a very common emotion when we lose someone, and it's fair. Anger is a very fair emotion when you lose someone. So next week we will talk about anger. This is an interactive platform, so if you're here with me, you can always feel free to chime in. I'm here for you. And you can again check our website out, www.southwestfunerallandcremation.com. Thank you for joining me. I look forward to sharing with you on this grief platform. This is the Southwest Grief Corner, and I am Tyra Watson, your aftercare director. God bless you. Thanks.